And now I think we've got 4 different perspectives on how to meet the challenges. Now I have planned and to try to have some other points of view, and I would like all of you to think about the presentations here and try to raise some specific questions, because you all have different backgrounds. But what I heard here is that you're all talking about getting common platforms, talking about collaboration, and that we have to do things together. But what I think is quite difficult is to find the way to do it. How do we actually make decisions in common? How do we create these common platforms, as you mentioned, Thomas? Do you have any kind of description of how do we really make this?
Yes, I've been involved in several processes like this before, not only in Stockholm. My experience is that it's always start with some kind of political will, which gives a mandate to go further on. Of course, you have opinion groups in society and many stakeholders that want to do a lot of good things, but you also need some sort of political commitment to on a broad scale to go further on, to build on, and then you, I think, can start a dialogue with the stakeholders to some sort of discussions about what they want to do and what they need to do, and try to map that, so to speak, and together create a common vision, which could be policies and programs and actions later on. So I mean, it's actually a process of discussion with different stakeholders and try to find common grounds. To say from the city to NCC, okay, we know that you would like to, for instance, introduce BREEAM, the system for classifying in buildings, and we would like to support that from the city. We start a project together and do it. Actually, we are doing that in Stockholm now with NCC, your colleagues, but in Sweden, for instance. So it's not the city as the authority, but as a development partner, so to speak. It's a new way. And one can say, yes, to summarize, this approach was actually invented in a way in the Rio conference 1992, which was the Agenda 21 process and the local Agenda 21, which has been a very productive bottom-up approach, which we tend to forget now, which is a pity.
Well, maybe we could try to be more specific here, because you are talking about a new municipality, a municipality facilitating different kinds of development.
Yeah.
I would try to make a very specific example, because last week we conducted a workshop with several potential partners, and we were regarding a possible retrofitting of a large office block, one of the municipality's office blocks. And one of the conclusions of the workshop was that what would need to rethinking the development perspective, and we have to introduce several new special interests very early in the development on retrofitting. We need constructors, we need architects, but what we concluded was that we also needed to involve the staff members, the customers, and the neighbors, etc. If you had to make a suggestion to us, does it make a reason to include all kind of neighbors and customers very early in the development process, and how do we really do that as a municipality?
That's a very hard question to answer. I mean, it depends on the specific situation. I must know more about it actually in order to say something about that. In some senses, you don't need to involve all the grassroots in everything you're doing. It might be okay to only include the key stakeholders, identify them and include them, and at a later stage maybe include the grassroots. In another project it could be the opposite. You should start with the grassroots. So I mean, this depends.
This depends on the specific
Yeah.
situation.
Yeah.
But maybe I can give a small comment on this. Thomas, you mentioned the word vision, to have a clear vision what to achieve. And I think the power of having a real vision is great, especially for developing green cities. A small example from years ago, in the Cold World War between America and America and Russia. At a certain moment, the United States said, we want to go to the moon. And this was so powerful, and that it was not really necessary to involve all the people and have bottom-up processes, because it was so powerful.
Yeah.
But you can also do, I think, this with green cities, to have the joys of a green city for the future. We can achieve it in 20, 30 years. Can you imagine a city with electric cars, and with enough space and with good social conditions that you can walk and you hear the birds? That's fantastic. If we use these things, I think we can move with all the power we need to go to a green society.
Martin?
Actually, I agree. And I think I would try to come up with a common vision. Maybe it would not be accepted today, but it is a global thing we're standing up on, as I see it. So I think actually if one could take the vision and say, hey, buildings should produce more energy that they consume, then we have a common system that we can all work together at. And if you look actually, just to take a comparison, if you look at the internet is 20 years old. It is computers all over the world talking to each other on a net. If you could do the same actually with buildings, talking to each other, producing and using consumption of energy, then we have a common vision.
Okay. Signe?
Yeah, I'd like to bit in, not especially on your perspective, Martin, but rather on the process thing, when you ask for how can we actually do this and being very concrete. And I think it's very true that there are no, I mean, you have to take, I mean, the given context it will form the job, if you can say that. So it's very, very complex, and I think it's very, very important that you stick to complexity and not running away from it, trying to make things simple, because it's not simple, and the simple city doesn't work, and the simple town planning scheme or the simple process management is not an issue, but still keeping complexity as almost a goal, I think is very important.
Okay. When I was preparing the session, I just was thinking, why do we not have a partner from the financing companies? Because I think that one of the large problems here is that the economic crisis is reducing construction activity everywhere. Actually, we have no representative here, but it would still be quite interesting for me to hear your views of what we could take to gain the needed capital for investments. At what point on this process we're talking about should we involve the investors? Do you have the point that because we need the money for developing, and actually the city of Copenhagen has not that much money.
I have a clear answer on that. You should involve them as soon as possible. And why now? Because we all know the reputation of the banks that has been better in the past. So this is an excellent moment for them to move to another direction. And why is it good for them? If you, for instance, you build an office building, an energy-producing office building, you don't have the risk anymore that you can't afford the energy later on. But also look at the humans who are going to work in that building. If you take into consideration that it must be a good building, a good indoor air climate, but also good social functions in this building, then people want this building also after 40 years. So for a developer, it's great. You don't have the risk that you can't rent it anymore because it's ugly, or because you can't use it, or because the energy bill is too high, etc. So I think for the financial people, they have to step in directly, as soon as possible.
As soon as possible. And you agree?
Yeah, I agree with Johan, and I think also actually it was you started, Johan, that said that we need also more creativity in the finance sector. And they were very creative 5 years ago, talking about all this, actually they raised the financial bubble. So now maybe we need some kind of creativity to how can we stimulate actually green loan or something. And then from an investor perspective, if the building produces more energy than it consumes, then you have a profit, ongoing profit, year round, all years. And when it comes to scarce resources, I think that maybe in some years there will be some investors that suddenly see that buildings are actually containers of materials and investments in upcoming resources.
Okay,